There are two things in life that guarantee a bad day: a "we need to talk" text from your wife, and a beige envelope from the Homeowners Association. This one, sticking out of my mailbox like a judgmental tongue, was the latter. It was, if such a thing were possible, an extra beige envelope. It felt smug. It felt somehow passive-aggressive before I'd even opened it. I sighed, pulling it free. My name, Mark Davison, was printed in a joyless Times New Roman font. The Oakwood Creek Estates logo in the corner, a single, sterile-looking oak tree, seemed to be sneering at me. I walked inside, the envelope held between two fingers as if it were contaminated. My wife, Sarah, was at the kitchen island, laptop open, phone pressed to her ear, negotiating a supply chain issue for the small logistics company she ran. "No, Greg, on the water doesn't count if the ship is still in harbor in Singapore," she was saying, her work voice firmly in place. "I need it on a truck." I waved the beige rectangle of doom in her peripheral vision. She held up one finger, finished her call with a series of sharp, efficient no's, and finally hung up, rubbing her temples. "Okay, what is it?" she said, finally looking at me. "You've got your 'I just found a spider in my cereal' face on." "Worse," I said, tossing the envelope onto the granite countertop. "The fun police struck again? The Ministry of Beige? The Beige Inquisition?" "Oh God, what is it this time?" Sarah sighed, picking it up. "Is the recycling bin aesthetically displeasing again? Did I park 2 inches onto the driveway apron? Did they measure the grass?" "Open it," I said grimly. "It feels heavier than a simple grass height violation." She tore it open. Her eyes scanned the page. She blinked. "They're fining you? For Bartholomew?" "Exactly." "Wait, you named your archery target?" "That is not the point, Sarah," I said, probably a little too loudly. "The point is, they're classifying him as an unsightly structure under Bylaw 7.4a and a non-sanctioned projectile-based recreational installation under 9.2c. Sarah read from the letter, her voice dripping with mock seriousness. "The presence of said target and its associated paraphernalia are not in keeping with the visual harmony of the community." She looked up. "Paraphernalia? You mean your bow? The thing you keep in a locked case in the garage? They make it sound like I've got a row of severed heads on spikes back there," I grumbled, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "It's a foam block, Sarah. A high-density, professional-grade foam block with a lovely woven grass backstop. It's tasteful. To be fair, honey, you did draw a handlebar mustache on the paper target you pinned to it. That was for aiming practice. Bartholomew is innocent in this. This has Brenda's fingerprints all over it." Brenda Hovan, President, Treasurer, Secretary, and Chief Enforcer of the Oakwood Creek Estates HOA Board. Woman who probably ironed her bedsheets and color-coded her grocery lists. A woman who seemed to derive a life-sustaining energy from the petty application of absolute power. My last run-in with Brenda was 3 months ago, over our welcome mat. It was a perfectly nice welcome mat. It said "Welcome" on it. But according to Brenda, who had arrived at our door with a tape measure, I am not making that up, a tape measure, it was 0.5 inches over the approved 18 by 30-inch size limit, stated in the Bylaw Appendix G, Approved Entryway Decor. I had to trim it, with scissors, while she watched. I stomped out the back sliding door, beer in hand, and glared at the crime scene. My backyard was, in my opinion, lovely. Manicured lawn, cut to the approved 2.5-inch height, a nice composite deck, color, saddle, pre-approved, and a neat flower bed. In the far back corner, tucked against my own shed and over 100 feet from any neighbor, sat Bartholomew. He was, as I'd said, a professional foam block. Behind him, a massive, thick hay bale I'd sourced from a local farm, just in case of a wild shot. The entire setup was backed by the solid, windowless wall of my shed. The only way I could hit another house was if I missed by 90 degrees and somehow shot an arrow over my own roof. It was the safest, most suburban-friendly archery setup imaginable. I was a responsible 40-something graphic designer, not Legolas. I just liked the thwack of an arrow hitting a target after a long day of arguing with clients about font choices. As if summoned by my rage, a shrill voice cut through the 6 o'clock p.m. quiet. "Oh, Mark! I see you got the notice!" I turned. There she was. Brenda, on the public walking path that ran behind our property line. She was coincidentally walking her small, yapping dog, a creature that looked like a wad of dryer lint with anxiety issues. She had her clipboard. She always had her clipboard. "Brenda," I said, forcing a smile so tight my cheeks hurt. "A pleasure. Yes, I just got it. Seems a little much, don't you think? It's just a foam block. It's smaller than your... Well, it's small. It's a liability, Mark," she said, her voice piercing. "And it's not in keeping with the community's visual harmony. We simply cannot have residents practicing with weaponry in plain sight. What if a child saw it?" "A child did see it," I retorted. "My son, Leo. He thought it was cool. Then he went back to his iPad. And Brenda, my kid's Nerf gun is more dangerous than this. I'm shooting at foam." She ticked something on her clipboard. "The board has voted. You have 48 hours to remove the entire installation, Bartholomew and the hay structure, or the fines begin. $100 a day, compounded weekly." "Compounded? Brenda, you're not a credit card company." "Rules are rules, Mark. Have a lovely evening." She gave a tight-lipped smile and trotted off, her dog yapping in sync with her footsteps. I stared at Bartholomew. He looked so innocent, so foam-like. "Visual harmony," I muttered. This from a woman who had 3 pink plastic flamingos on her front lawn, which, I was almost certain, also violated Bylaw 7.4a. I stalked back inside, fuming. I was vibrating with a specific kind of suburban rage that only an HOA can induce. "So?" Sarah asked. "Did you talk to her?" "Oh, I talked to her," I said, pacing the kitchen. "She's fining me $100 a day, compounded." Sarah winced. "Ouch. Okay, honey, just take it down. It's not worth it. You can go to the range on weekends." I stopped pacing. I looked at her. "No. No? Mark, we are not paying thousands of dollars for a block of foam you named after a cartoon bear." "It's not about the target," I said, jabbing a finger toward the window. "It's the principle. It's the hypocrisy. It's the sheer, unadulterated, clipboard-wielding tyranny of it all. She can't just dictate every square inch of my life. She wants to cite bylaws? Fine. We'll play by the bylaws." Sarah's face shifted from annoyed to concerned. She knew this look. This was the look I got right before I decided to fix the dishwasher myself and ended up flooding the kitchen. This was the look I got before I tried to build a rustic dining room table that ended up with 5 legs. "Mark, what are you doing?" I ignored her. I went to my home office, a room otherwise dedicated to graphic design and managing my freelance invoices. I went to the bookshelf, to the bottom shelf, where it lay collecting dust. The 300-page, coil-bound, beige-covered behemoth. The Oakwood Creek Estates Covenant, Conditions and Restrictions. I heaved it off the shelf and dropped it onto my desk. It landed with a seismic, satisfying thud. "Mark," Sarah said, standing in the doorway. "I'm just going to do a little light reading," I said, pulling my desk chair out. I grabbed a yellow highlighter and a fresh legal pad. She wants a war of bureaucracy? She just kicked a hornet's nest. But she doesn't know that this hornet has a minor in pre-law and a major in being a smartass. A slow, dangerous grin spread across my face. I cracked open the binder to page 1. "Okay, Brenda, let's dance." The next 6 hours were a blur of legalese, stale coffee, and the squeak of a highlighter. Sarah had long since given up and gone to bed, muttering something about plausible deniability. Leo was asleep. It was just me, the binder, and the hum of my desktop computer. I was no lawyer, but I was a freelance graphic designer. My entire career was based on reading a client's vague, contradictory brief and finding a creative solution that technically met all their stupid demands. This was no different. The HOA covenant was just the worst designed brief of all time. My internal monologue was a running commentary, a voiceover for my own descent into bureaucratic madness. Okay, Section 8. Fences, walls, and hedges. All fences must be white vinyl or natural wood stain. Appendix C for approved stains. Height not to exceed 6 feet. Blah, blah, blah. Boring. Not useful. Section 9. Recreational equipment. Aha, here we go. 9.1. Swing sets and playscapes must be constructed of approved materials. See Appendix D. 9.2. Basketball hoops must be transparent polycarbonate, or... Okay, here it is. 9.2c. Projectile-based recreation, including but not limited to archery targets, firing ranges, pellet gun ranges, and axe-throwing apparatuses, are strictly prohibited. I leaned back, deflated. Damn. She had me dead to rights. Including, but not limited to, was the killer. Archery targets was spelled out. My quick and easy plan to just call Bartholomew a vertical arrow-stopping device was dead. I drank the last of my cold coffee. It tasted like defeat. Don't give up, I told myself. She won the battle. Now you have to win the war. I couldn't have an archery target, but Brenda's fatal flaw was her specificity. She had banned the object, but had she banned the activity? And what had she failed to ban? I kept digging. I scrolled past mailboxes, satellite dishes, and solar panels. I got to Section 12. Landscaping and structures. This was it. This was the soft underbelly. Bylaw 12.5. No permanent sporting structures, e.g. concrete basketball courts, tennis courts, in-ground pools, may be erected without prior written approval from the Architectural Review Board. The key word hung in the air, glowing like a neon sign. Permanent. Whatever I built, it couldn't be permanent. It had to be removable. My archery target, which was just a block on the ground, wasn't permanent. But Brenda had used 9.2c to override that. I needed a different angle. I kept reading. 12.6. Gnomes and Statuary. 12.7. Seasonal decorations. And then I found it. The Holy Grail. The shining, beautiful, exploitable loophole. Bylaw 12.8. Temporary cultural, educational, or historical displays, including seasonal decorations, e.g. Halloween, Christmas, are permitted. Such displays do not require board approval, provided they are maintained in good condition, do not obstruct public walkways or drives, and do not remain in place for more than 90 days without a review. My heart started pounding. A historical display. Brenda had banned my archery target. She said nothing about a medieval weapons training apparatus. I typed medieval practice equipment into Google. The first images that popped up were for Pell posts, just a log, boring, and, oh, hello, a quintain. I stared at the picture. It was a rotating target on a post. A knight would ride at it with a lance, strike the shield, and the whole thing would spin. On the other side of the spinning arm was a counterweight, often a sandbag or a mace. The goal was to hit it and ride on before the counterweight swung around and smacked you in the back of the head. It was glorious. It was loud. It was historical. And it was, technically, a display. A slow, maniacal grin spread across my face. "Okay, Brenda," I whispered to the empty room. "You don't want my quiet, stationary foam block. Let's see how you like a 4-foot spinning medieval concussion machine." It was 1:30 a.m., but I knew he'd be awake. I dialed. He picked up on the second ring. "Dave's Den of Steel," a gravelly voice answered, background noise sounding suspiciously like a plasma cutter. "You break it, I weld it." "Dave, it's Mark. I have a hypothetical question." There was a long, suffering sigh on the other end. "Mark, last time you had a hypothetical question, you hypothetically built a potato cannon that, hypothetically, launched a russet into your neighbor's inflatable pool 3 houses down. What's up?" Dave was my college buddy. He was one of those guys who had turned all his weird hobbies into a career. He ran a small, custom fabrication shop, but his real passion, and a surprising portion of his income, came from working at the local Renaissance Fair. He played Sir Drogon the Iron-Hearted, and more importantly, he built and repaired all the armor, props, and fake weapons. "The HOA is banning Bartholomew," I said. A low growl. "Let me guess. Queen Brenda, first of her name? Tyrant of the Beige?" "The very same. She cited 9.2c. I'm dead on archery targets. But I found a loophole. Bylaw 12.8. "The seasonal display clause?" Dave asked immediately. The man knew his loopholes. He'd once used it to get away with a 15-foot-tall, fire-breathing metal dragon in his front yard for Halloween, claiming it was a cultural display of Welsh heritage. "The very same. So I need a new hobby. Something historical, something temporary, something jousty." There was a long, beautiful silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the gears turning in Dave's head. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a reverent awe. "Mark, you beautiful, magnificent bastard. Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "How fast can you build me a quintain?" I asked. "A really loud, spinning one, with, say, a shield on one side and a big ol' sandbag on the other?" "Aha! A quintain! Oh, this is beautiful. You're going full medieval on her. I can build you one that'll sound like a wind turbine when you hit it. I've got the ball bearings from that old truck differential. It'll spin for days. I can have it done by the weekend. But what are you going to ride? Your kid's bicycle?" "I'm getting to that," I said. looking out my office window at the dark, pristine, boring expanse of my backyard. First, I need a lane. A lane? A jousting lane, Dave. A tilt rail. A 100-foot-long wooden barrier down the middle of my yard. You're building a tilt yard? In Oakwood Creek? Mark, they're going to have an aneurysm. That's the idea, but I can't build it. I'm a graphic designer. But you know guys, and I know landscapers. The plan was no longer just a quintain. The plan had escalated. The plan was now a spectacle. I hung up with Dave and pulled out my sketch pad, the one I used for logo concepts. I started sketching. Why stop at a quintain? Why stop at a simple rail? If I was going to build a historical display, let's display some history. Okay, I muttered, scribbling furiously. A full jousting lane. The tilt rail, the center fence, isn't a fence, which is heavily regulated by Section 8. No, it's a display partition, part of the cultural exhibit. It's not a permanent sporting structure, Bylaw 12.5. It's a temporary installation, Bylaw 12.8. I started adding flourishes. Gotta have banners. Big, colorful banners on poles at either end. And at the charging ends, what did they call them? Oh, right. Lists. I'll need small, raised platforms. I was so deep in my creative frenzy I didn't hear Sarah come in. Mark, it's 2 a.m. What on earth? She stopped, peering over my shoulder at the sketch. It was, I had to admit, a little insane. A detailed drawing of our backyard, but with a 100-foot-long fence down the middle, a spinning contraption at one end, and 2 figures labeled Night 1 and Night 2 riding things. You've been in here for 6 hours, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. You have that look on your face. The I'm about to make a decision, I'll find hilarious and you'll find mortifying look. Honey, I said, spinning in my chair, holding the sketch pad. How do you feel about banners? Banners? Like House of Davison banners, with a rampant badger on them, because Brenda is she's a Hufflepuff. Sarah pinched the bridge of her nose. A badger, of course. Mark, what are you building? I'm not building anything, I said, giving her my most innocent smile. I'm curating an exhibit, just a landscape feature, a very, very long, thin sun, wooden landscape feature, with room for steeds. Steeds? She asked, her eyes narrowing at the small, blocky shapes I'd drawn. Mark, is that your ride-on lawn mower? It's a 22-horsepower John Deere, I said defensively. It's got torque. It's practically a warhorse. She stared at me for a full 10 seconds. Finally, she just sighed, shook her head, and walked out of the room. Plausible deniability, I heard her mutter as she walked down the hall. I saw nothing. I know nothing. I turned back to my desk, pulling up Google. Best price on 100 feet of 4x4 posts. Phase 2 was a go. The next morning, I was on the phone. My first call was to Prestige Landscaping and Outdoor Solutions. A very professional-sounding woman answered. Prestige Landscaping, how may I direct your call? Hi. Yes, I'd like to get a quote on installing a long wooden rail in my backyard. Certainly, sir. Would this be for a deck or a perimeter fence? Neither. It's a central rail. It's called a tilt rail. It would be about 100 feet long, 4 feet high, and just run right down the middle of the yard. Oh, and I'd need 2 small raised dirt mounds at either end. There was a silence so profound, I thought she'd hung up. Sir? She finally said, her voice dripping with confusion. A tilt rail? Yes, for a historical display. You know, Renaissance-themed? Click. She hung up on me. Okay, so the prestige route was out. Time for the no questions asked route. I found a listing on a local classified site. Bargain Bob's Landscaping and Construction. We build it, we haul it, we dig it. No job too weird. Call Bob. This sounded more promising. I dialed. Yeah, Bargain Bob's. What do you need? The voice sounded like it had been gargling gravel and chain-smoking since the Nixon administration. Hi, Bob. My name's Mark. I have well, I guess it's a weird job. Kid, I just built a 3-story cat tree inside a guy's living room and hauled a hot tub out of a basement. Weird is my bread and butter. Hit me. Okay, I said, taking a breath. I need a single wooden rail, about 100 feet long. Needs to be sturdy. Say 4x4 posts every 8 feet, with 2 2x6 rails running horizontal. 4 feet high. And I need it built right down the center line of my backyard. Another long pause. I was getting used to these. A fence, Bob said. No, not a fence. It doesn't enclose anything. It's just a rail, a tilt rail, technically. Oh, and I also need a single 10-foot-tall 6x6 post, cemented in at one end, about 10 feet away from the rail, and 2 small raised mounds of dirt at either end of the 100-foot line. This pause was the longest yet. I heard a thwack sound, like he'd spat tobacco into a can. Son, you building a motocross track? No, it's a historical display for a Renaissance Faire theme. Renaissance theme. He said it like he was trying to figure out what planet it was from. You gonna be wearing, tights? No tights, Bob. Just some light medieval-themed recreation. Right. Look, buddy, it's your money and your yard. My business ain't to ask why, it's to ask how much. You got the cash, my guys will build a full-scale pyramid to Cthulhu if the check clears. 100-foot rail, 4x4s, treated pine, 1 big-ass post. Call it $3,000. We can be there Thursday. You're hired, Bob, I said, relief flooding through me. One question. Can you make it look rustic? Rustic? Kid, my guys are rustic. Rustic is our default setting. We'll see you Thursday, 8 a.m. I hung up, victorious. I'd found my build crew. Thursday morning arrived, right on schedule. At 7:59 a.m., a truck that looked like it had lost a fight with a bigger truck and then been set on fire and then put out with axes, rumbled up to my curb. It was towing a trailer loaded with lumber and a cement mixer. Bargain Bob's was painted on the side, though the G and I were missing. It now said, Bar Ein Bob's. 3 of the largest, hairiest men I had ever seen got out. They were all wearing cut-off sleeve shirts in 50-degree weather, and looked less like landscapers and more like the road crew for a death metal band. Bob, presumably, was not with them. The foreman, a man with a beard that looked like it housed several small, angry animals, lumbered to my door. He was holding my sketch. Mark Davison? He grunted. That's me? He just stared at me. Renaissance, huh? Historical display, I corrected him cheerfully. He grunted again, which I took to mean, let's get this over with. He walked into the backyard, pointed at the ground, and yelled, Line goes here. For the next 5 hours, my backyard was a symphony of chaos. The sounds of post-hole diggers, industrial saws, and hammers echoed through the cul-de-sac. It was glorious. Neighbors started peeking out their windows. Mr. Henderson from 2 doors down, who was washing his HOA-approved almond sedan just stood there, hose dangling, watching the proceedings with a look of profound confusion. I, meanwhile, was cheerfully directing traffic from my deck, holding a coffee mug and my own clipboard, on which I'd printed a fresh copy of Bylaw 12.8. Around 11 o'clock a.m., I knew she'd show. I felt her presence before I saw her, like a drop in barometric pressure. Mark! Mark Davison! Brenda was marching across my front lawn, a clear violation of Bylaw 3.1, public versus private walkways, and came straight through my side gate, which I had deliberately left open. "What is this?" she shrieked, her voice an octave higher than usual. The construction crew didn't even pause. "This is unapproved construction. This is a major violation. That wood isn't on the approved color palette." I took a calm sip of my coffee. "Brenda, so glad you're here. Isn't it exciting?" I gestured to my own clipboard. "This? Oh, this is just my temporary cultural display, per Bylaw 12.8. I'm curating an exhibit. No board approval needed, as long as it's maintained and temporary." Brenda's eyes narrowed. She was practically vibrating. It's a fence. You are building a fence in the middle of your yard. That is a Section 8 violation." "Ah, but it's not a fence, Brenda," I said, tapping my clipboard. "A fence, by legal definition, and by the covenant's own language, encloses a property. This tilt rail encloses nothing. It's a display partition, part of the exhibit." "And the wood," she sputtered. "It's raw. It's unpainted." "Not unpainted," I corrected. "It's rustic stained. Very 14th century. It's historically accurate. I'm really leaning into the cultural aspect of 12.8. You should be pleased. I even sent the board a notification and everything. Certified mail. You probably got the slip for it this morning." Her face went pale. She knew I had her. A notification was not an application. It meant, "I'm telling you, not asking you." I will be calling an emergency meeting of the board," she stammered. "Great! You do that," I said. "The exhibit's grand opening is Saturday. I'll be sure to send an invite. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think they're about to pour the cement for the quintain post. Very exciting stuff." Brenda looked at the three giant, sweaty men who had momentarily paused to stare at her. The foreman spit. She turned a shade of puce I had only ever seen on a questionable beet salad, let out a small, strangled noise, and stormed off. The foreman looked at me. "That the Renaissance Queen?" "That's her," I said. He nodded, a look of profound understanding on his face. "Post hole. Deeper," he yelled at his crew. "Put some extra bag in that mix." I think I'd just made some new friends. By 4 p.m., they were done. And it was magnificent. It was the most beautiful, pointless, and aggressive piece of landscaping in the entire state. A 100-foot-long, perfectly straight, 4-foot-high wooden rail ran the length of my yard. At the far end, the 10-foot 6'6" post stood like a monument. At either end of the lane, the crew had dumped and raked 2 perfect starting mounds. I paid the foreman in cash. He counted it, nodded, and handed me a receipt. "Pleasure doing business, Mark. You ever decide to build that Cthulhu pyramid, you call us first." Just as they were pulling away, Dave's beat-up pickup truck rounded the corner. He parked, got out, and just stared. "My God," he said, a single tear rolling down his cheek. It's beautiful. It's the stupidest thing I have ever seen. I love it." In the bed of his truck was the pièce de résistance, the quintain. It was a monstrosity of welded steel, a heavy base, a thick pole, and a spinning crossarm. On one end, a shield from the Renaissance Faire, painted with a gaudy dragon. On the other, a heavy-duty canvas sack, which Dave promptly filled with 50 pounds of sand. He'd attached a small bell to it for good measure. "I used those truck bearings," he said, grinning, as we bolted it to the 6x6 post. "She's balanced, but loud." He gave the shield a push. The arms spun, making a low, menacing whirr sound, like a helicopter powering up. The sandbag swung around with terrifying speed, and the bell dinged. Whirr, ding. "It's perfect," I breathed. "Now," Dave said, "for the banners." He pulled out 2 long, colorful banners. He'd made them himself. One was bright red, and just as I'd requested, featured a snarling, rampant badger. Underneath, it said, "House Davison." The other was, of course, beige. In that same awful Times New Roman font, Dave had stenciled 2 words. Visus Harmonia. Latin, Dave said proudly, for visual harmony, just so she knows you're complying. We mounted them on 15-foot poles at either end of the lane. They flapped gently in the breeze. My yard now looked like a medieval tournament that had collided with a suburban identity crisis. "All that's left," Dave said, rubbing his hands together, "are the steeds." I nodded. I went to the garage. I pushed the button. The door rumbled open. There, side by side, sat my 22-horsepower John Deere E130 and Dave's, slightly larger, slightly more menacing, 24-horsepower Husqvarna. "I sharpened the blades on mine," Dave said, "just in case." "This isn't a battle, Dave. It's a display." Right, display," he grinned. "I also brought accoutrements." He tossed me a plastic night helmet he'd spray-painted silver. He had one for himself. Then he produced the lances. They were 10-foot-long rake handles with the metal parts removed. On the ends, he had securely duct-taped pool noodles. I hefted my lance. It was light, sturdy, and wonderfully idiotic. "Saturday," I said, my voice full of anticipation. 2 o'clock. High noon is too cliché." "Huzzah," Dave said. Saturday arrived, bright and clear. It was a perfect autumn afternoon. By 1:45 p.m., the neighborhood was aware. The coconut telegraph of the suburbs had been working overtime. People were casually doing yard work. Mr. Henderson was washing his car. Again. The Millers from across the street had brought lawn chairs out to their driveway. A group of teenagers I'd never seen before were gathered on the sidewalk, filming on their phones. And then there was Brenda's house. Her blinds were drawn, but I could feel her, watching. At 1:55 p.m., Sarah came out onto the deck. She was holding the megaphone Leo used for his pee-wee soccer games. "I am not a part of this," she announced to me, her voice unamplified. "I am an impartial observer documenting the event for insurance purposes." "Got it," I said. I was strapping my plastic helmet on. It smelled like spray paint and regret. "That being said," she continued, a small smile playing on her lips, "if you're going to do it right." She clicked the megaphone on. A small burst of feedback squealed across the neighborhood. "Squee! Ahem! Testing, testing! Lords and ladies of Oakwood Creek!" her voice boomed, echoing off the vinyl siding of the houses. "Welcome!" At 2:00 p.m. on the dot, Dave and I emerged. He rode from the side gate on his mighty Husqvarna. I rode from the garage on my noble John Deere. We were both wearing our helmets, visors down. I had a small cape, an old red tablecloth, pinned to my flannel shirt. We took our positions at our respective starting mounds at either end of the 100-foot tilt rail. The House Davison Badger banner flapped over my head. The Visus Harmonia banner flapped over Dave's. "In the far corner," Sarah announced via megaphone, "riding Old Greenie, we have the challenger, Sir Mark of the Manicured Lawn." A few neighbors, including Mr. Henderson, actually cheered. "And in the near corner," she continued, "riding the Orange Death, we have his opponent, Sir Dave of the, 2008 pickup truck." Dave revved his engine. "Vroom, vroom!" I revved mine in response. "Vroom, put-put, vroom!" "Sir Mark," Dave shouted over the idling engines, his voice tinny, inside the helmet. "Prepare to meet thy doom. Thy mother was a hamster, and thy father smelt of elderberries." "Have it thee, varlet," I yelled back, lowering my pool noodle lance. "For the honor of the cul-de-sac, and for Bartholomew! On the count of 3, Sarah's voice boomed. 1, 2, charge! I slammed the hydrostatic drive pedal to the floor. The John Deere leaped forward, accelerating to its blistering top speed of 5.5 miles per hour. Across the way, Dave did the same. We thundered down the lane, one on each side of the tilt rail. The engines whined. Grass clippings sprayed from our mower decks. I could see the teenagers on the sidewalk doubling over, their phones held high. I braced myself, aiming my pool noodle at the dragon shield. Dave was aiming for it, too. We were going to hit it at the same time. This was going to be epic. Closer, closer, thwack! My noodle hit the shield a split second before Dave's. The impact was underwhelming. But it was enough. The Quintaine's internal bearings, lovingly over-greased by Dave, did their job. The entire arm spun with a terrifying metal-on-metal whirr. The 50-pound sandbag at the other end, now traveling at a significant fraction of the speed of sound, or so it seemed, swung around. Dave, being closer, was the target. "Oh, crap!" he yelled. Thwack! The sandbag hit him squarely in the back of his plastic helmet. His head snapped forward. His mower veered wildly, running over a small, decorative garden gnome I'd forgotten was there. The gnome exploded into 100 plaster pieces. "Whir-ding!" the bell sang. Dave's mower stalled. He sat there, slumped over the steering wheel, motionless. I pulled my mower to a halt and flipped up my visor, my heart pounding. "Dave, you alive, man?" A muffled, "Ow," came from the helmet. Slowly, Dave lifted his head. He flipped up his visor. He had a dazed, ecstatic grin on his face. "It works!" he yelled. "It really, really works!" The entire cul-de-sac erupted. Not just polite chuckles. Full-on applause. Mr. Henderson was whistling. The teenagers were cheering. "Second pass!" I yelled, reversing my mower. "Let's go!" Dave roared, pulling his starter cord. We did it 3 more times. The whir-thwack, whir-thwack became a rhythm. On the 4th pass, we both missed the shield entirely and just sort of listlessly bumped our pool noodles against each other as we passed. "An honorable draw," Sarah announced, her voice cracking with suppressed laughter. And that, of course, is when I heard the car door slam. The official car door slam. The cheering died instantly. It was replaced by that, "Oh, the cops are here," hush. A black and white squad car was parked at the curb, and marching up my driveway, her face a mask of triumphant rage, was Brenda. Flanking her were 2 police officers. One was older, with a mustache that had seen things, and a name tag that read Miller. The other was younger, looked like he was fresh out of the academy, and his name tag read Chen. Officer Miller looked at the scene. He looked at the 100-foot rail. He looked at the banners. He looked at the spinning quintain, which was still slowly rotating. Whir-ding. He looked at me and Dave, sitting on ride-on lawnmowers, wearing plastic helmets and holding pool noodles. He let out the longest, most profound sigh I have ever heard in my life. It was a sigh that said, "I'm too old for this. I should have retired last year, and why didn't I become a plumber?" "Officers, thank goodness," Brenda announced, her voice ringing with false victimhood. "See, it's a menace. He's a public nuisance. He's disturbing the peace. He's operating unlicensed industrial vehicles in a reckless manner. And that thing," she pointed a trembling finger at the Quinton, "it's a weapon. He's trying to intimidate me." Officer Miller just held up a hand. "Ma'am, please, let me handle this." He walked onto the grass. Officer Chen followed, his hand near his notepad, but his eyes wide, like a kid at a bizarre theme park. He was desperately trying not to laugh. I could see his shoulders shaking. "Sir," Officer Miller said, addressing me. He looked at my helmet. "Sir, can you, step off the mower, please? And maybe put down the noodle." I killed the engine, flipped up my visor, and dropped the rake handle. "Afternoon, officers. Is there a problem? Just enjoying my historical display with my friend." "A historical display?" Miller asked, his face deadpan. "That's right," I said, tapping the Visus Harmonia banner. "It's a temporary cultural exhibit per HOA bylaw 12.8. That there is a quintain. It's a 14th century practice dummy. We're jousting. Badly." "He's mocking me!" Brenda shrieked. "He did all this madness, because I banned his illegal archery target. He's unstable." Officer Miller turned his tired eyes to Brenda. "Ma'am, is he on his own property?" "Yes, but is he on your property?" "No, but is he violating any city noise ordinances?" He glanced at his watch. "It's 2:30 on a Saturday. The mowers are no louder than any other lawn equipment I hear." "Well, no, but he's reckless. That thing hit him." She pointed at Dave. Officer Miller looked at Dave. "Sir, are you injured? Do you wish to press charges for assault with a sandbag?" Dave flipped up his visor. "Me? No way, officer. I built that thing. I'm just proud it works as advertised. This is all in good fun." Officer Chen turned away, coughing violently into his elbow. It was a very unconvincing cough. "And this structure?" Miller asked, walking over and tapping the tilt rail. "Sir, did you get a city permit for this?" "Not required, officer," I said, pulling a folded paper from my back pocket. "I called the city planning office on Friday, spoke to a nice lady named Pam. Any landscaping garden feature under 6 feet in height doesn't require a permit. This rail is 4 feet high. It's legally no different than a very, very long rose trellis." Officer Miller looked at the paper. He looked at Brenda. He looked at the quintain. He looked back at me. "Ma'am," he said to Brenda, his voice final. "This is an HOA dispute. It's a civil matter. There is no criminal activity here. We can't arrest him for jousting. He's on his own property. He's not breaking any city codes, and his friend is a willing participant. He's just being a weirdo." "A weirdo?" Brenda sputtered. "I demand—" "You can demand all you want, but you'll have to do it through your association's lawyers. We're leaving." Sirs, he nodded to me and Dave, try not to knock each other out. Officer Miller turned and walked back to his car. Officer Chen, his face bright red, gave us a quick, almost imperceptible nod of respect and scurried after him. Brenda was left standing in the middle of my driveway. She was frozen, defeated, utterly humiliated. The entire neighborhood had just watched her call the cops, only to be told I was just a weirdo and that she had no power. I was still sitting on my mower. I gave her my most cheerful, helpful smile. "Hey, Bren," I called out. "We were just about to switch to 2-on-2. Want to go next? We've got a spare helmet. It's got a nice plume." For a second, I didn't think she was breathing. She turned a shade of purple I had only ever seen on an exotic eggplant. Then she let out a sound. It wasn't a word. It wasn't a scream. It was an inhuman shriek of pure, distilled rage, like a tea kettle reaching its boiling point. She turned on her heel, so fast she almost tripped, and stormed off down the street, her hands balled into fists. The moment she was out of earshot, the cul-de-sac exploded. Mr. Henderson dropped his hose and was giving me a standing ovation. The teenagers were yelling, "Dude, sick!" The Millers were applauding from their lawn chairs. Sarah, on the deck, had put the megaphone down and was just laughing. Laughing so hard she had to hold on to the railing. I raised my pool noodle lance in a triumphant salute. "Huzzah!" I yelled. "Huzzah!" my neighbors yelled back. Checkmate. She wanted to play by the book. She just didn't realize I was the one who had read the whole thing, including the appendices. The victory high lasted for exactly 48 hours. On Monday afternoon, a courier in a uniform, not FedEx but a private, expensive-looking local service, rang my doorbell. He handed me a thick, stiff envelope that was definitely not beige. It was a threatening shade of ivory linen. It was from the high-powered law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Okay, not really, but it was something equally intimidating. Parker, Stone, and Abernathy, Association Law Specialists. Sarah was home for lunch. She watched me open it. It was, as I'd half expected, a cease and desist letter. But it was so much more. "Holy," I muttered, scanning the pages. "What?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with anxiety. They're fining me. Not the $100 a day fine. They're levying a special assessment for aesthetic and nuisance violations. They're fining me $5,000. They can't do that. Oh, they're trying, for the erection of unapproved, non-conforming structures, for the creation of a significant auditory and visual nuisance, for tortious interference with the aesthetic harmony of the community. They're even fining me for operation of industrial equipment for recreational purposes. They're calling my lawnmower industrial equipment." Sarah sat down hard on a kitchen stool. "Mark, this is serious. This isn't Brenda and her clipboard anymore. This is lawyers. They're going to sue us. We're going to have a lien put on the house." I read the letter again. All the bravado from Saturday was fading, replaced by a cold knot in my stomach. They were serious. They were going to bury me in legal fees until I cried uncle. But then I saw the last paragraph. "An emergency meeting of the Oakwood Creek Estates Board of Directors has been called for Wednesday at 7:00 p.m. at the Community Clubhouse. You are required to attend to show cause why these fines should not be enforced." I looked up at Sarah, and the knot in my stomach loosened. A slow smile returned to my face. "They're bluffing," I said. "Mark, that looks like the opposite of a bluff." "No, don't you see? If they were really going to sue me, they'd just sue. This—" "Show cause." I tapped the paper. "This is a negotiation. They're angry they lost face, and they're trying to scare me into submission before the big meeting. They're trying to re-establish dominance." I folded the letter. This isn't a legal summons. It's a peace treaty invitation. A very, very angry peace treaty invitation. It's time for the negotiation phase. And what are you going to negotiate? She asked. I just grinned. Don't worry, I'm bringing my clipboard. Wednesday night, the Oakwood Creek Clubhouse, a beige, windowless room that smelled of industrial floor wax, stale coffee, and petty grudges. The turnout was, for an HOA meeting, unprecedented. The place was packed. It was standing room only. My neighbors had come out in force. It was Team Brenda versus Team Mark. Brenda was at the front table with the other two board members, a nervous-looking guy named Gary, who always looked like he'd left his stove on, and a woman named Cynthia, who seemed to be made entirely of pearls and disapproval. The meeting started with 20 minutes of arguing about the new color for the clubhouse bathroom. Finally, Brenda, with a sharp bang of a tiny gavel, called the main event. We will now address the incident at 412 Poplar Court. That was me. Mr. Davison, she said, her voice dripping with venom. You have been fined $5,000 for numerous, flagrant violations of the covenant. The floor is yours to show cause why the board should not move to place a lien on your property for immediate collection. The room went silent. All eyes were on me. I stood up. I was wearing a nice button-down shirt and my serious glasses. I was holding two things: my copy of the HOA covenant and the original violation letter about Bartholomew. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, board members, I said, my voice calm and polite. I'm not a maniac. I'm not unstable. I'm a homeowner. I pay my dues. I cut my grass. I'm also, as it turns out, a bit of a history buff. I paused. All I ever wanted was my simple, quiet, safe archery target. It was tucked in a corner. It bothered no one. It was, I maintain, in perfect visual harmony. I held up the first letter. But Brenda here, and the board, decided that was unsightly and prohibited. And you were right. Bylaw 9.2c. You got me. So I removed it. I waited a beat. And then I read the rules you wrote, the rules you enforce, and I decided to follow them. To the letter. I held up the covenant. Bylaw 12.8. Temporary cultural, educational, or historical displays are permitted. It says nothing about quintains. It says nothing about tilt rails. It says nothing about jousting. It says no permanent sporting structures. My exhibit is, by its very nature, temporary. I can have it down in a day. The fine you sent me? It's nonsense, and your lawyers know it. It won't hold up. Brenda started to speak, but I held up a hand. I'm not done. The thing is, my display, it's been pretty popular. My kids love it. The neighbors seem to love it. Huzzah! Mr. Henderson yelled from the back. A few other people chuckled. It's bringing the community together, I said, smiling. But I'll admit, it's a bit much. It's a lot of culture for one backyard. I'm willing to be reasonable. This is an outrage, Brenda said, finding her voice. You will take it down immediately, and you will pay the fine for your circus. I'll take it down, I said, my voice cutting through her tirade. I'll take the whole thing down. The rail, the banners, the quintain. I'll even mow the starting mounds. I'll do it this weekend. The room went quiet again. Brenda looked stunned. I'll take it all down, I repeated, on one condition. All eyes were on me. Brenda's eyes were narrow slits. You want the jousting lane gone? Fine, I said. You want Vice's Harmonia to be a memory? Done. Just let me have my archery target back. I held up the original letter. That's all I ever wanted. Bartholomew. My quiet, safe foam block. You drop the $5,000 fine, which is illegal anyway, and you grant me an official, written, non-revocable variance for one archery target, to be placed as it was before. We put it in writing. We all sign it. We vote. Right now. Brenda opened her mouth, but Gary, the nervous board member, spoke first. A variance? He stammered. For the archery thing? In exchange for that? That's the deal, I said. You get your boring old visual harmony back. I get my hobby back. Everyone wins. Or, I keep the jousting lane. And I get really into it. I was thinking of adding a viewing stand. Maybe some music. Bagpipes. Bagpipes are very historical. A small gasp went up from the crowd. The threat of bagpipes had tipped the scales. Gary looked at Cynthia. Cynthia looked at Gary. They both looked at Brenda, who was staring daggers at me. All in favor, Gary said, his voice squeaking, of granting Mark Davison a variance for his original archery target, as described in Exhibit A. He pointed to the old letter. In exchange for the immediate and permanent removal of the jousting thing? Gary raised his hand. Cynthia, after a long, pearly pause, slowly raised hers. It was 2-1. It was done. Brenda didn't vote. She just sat there, her face a mask of stone. She knew she was beaten. She had been outmaneuvered, and the whole neighborhood knew it. Motion passes, Gary said, looking profoundly relieved. Meeting adjourned? 1 week later, my backyard was back to normal. Well, almost. Bargain Bob's crew, for $100 and a case of beer, had hauled away the tilt rail. Dave had reclaimed his quintain, muttering something about using it for the next fair. The starting mounds were gone, leveled by my mighty John Deere, now returned to its purely domestic duties. I was in my yard. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon. I pulled back the string of my bow, took a deep breath, and let it go. Thwack! The arrow hit the bullseye. I smiled, lowering my bow. Bartholomew was back in his corner, safe and sound. Stapled to his side, laminated and gleaming in the sun, was a small, official-looking tag. HOA variance number 1, Archery. Peace had been restored to Oakwood Creek. Property values were, presumably, stable once more. Sarah came out onto the deck, handing me a cold beer. Order is restored, I see. Yep, I said, taking a sip. Visual harmony all around. She looked at the yard. You know, it's funny. The yard looks kind of empty. I looked at the long, 100-foot stretch of open grass. I said, knocking another arrow. I know what you mean. Don't, she said, her voice a warning. Don't you dare! I drew the string, aimed, and let it fly. Thwack! Another bullseye. I was just thinking, I said, looking thoughtfully at the shed. I was reading the bylaws again, just for fun, and they say nothing. Absolutely nothing about trebuchets. Mark! I'm just saying. It's also historical. And it's not projectile-based, it's counterweight-based. Totally different bylaw. She grabbed the beer from my hand. Not a chance. I just grinned and went to pull my arrows. It was good to have my hobby back, but it was even better to know that I had a set of bagpipe MP3s and the number for bargain bobs, just in case Brenda ever got any ideas about my welcome mat again.